There's never really a break from politics, even during the holidays. As you enjoy Thanksgiving leftovers, we will feast on a discussion of political news and happenings with our panel of reporters on this edition of Iowa Press.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa PBS Foundation, the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
Elite Casino Resorts is rooted in Iowa. Elite's 1,600 employees are our company's greatest asset. A family-run business, Elite supports volunteerism, encourages promotions from within, and shares profits with our employees.
Across Iowa, hundreds of neighborhood banks strive to serve their communities, provide jobs, and help local businesses. Iowa banks are proud to back the life you build. Learn more at iowabankers.com.
For decades, Iowa Press has brought you political leaders and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond, celebrating more than 50 years on statewide Iowa PBS. This is the Friday, November 29th edition of Iowa Press. Here is Kay Henderson.
At Mar-a-Lago in Florida, President-elect Trump is assembling a team for his next administration. At the Statehouse in Des Moines, leaders in the Iowa House and Senate are assembling leaders for committees for the legislative session that will begin on January 13th. We have assembled a group of reporters who cover these issues and more for this edition of Iowa Press. And because of the holiday, we are taping on Tuesday to accommodate everyone's schedule so they can be with their family on Thursday. Our guests today are Katarina Sostaric. She is the state government reporter for Iowa Public Radio. Stephen Gruber-Miller is the Statehouse and politics reporter for the Des Moines Register. Amanda Rooker is chief political reporter for KCCI-TV in Des Moines. And Erin Murphy is the Des Moines bureau chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. Thanks to all of you for being here today. Let's begin with something that happened on Tuesday. Governor Kim Reynolds pardoned a couple of turkeys named Caitlin and Clark, but let's set that aside. She discussed a vacancy in state government. Erin, what was it?
Yeah, we have been without a lieutenant governor for a couple months now here in Iowa. Maybe not the most critical thing in the world. The state seems to be running okay, but it is the next in line if something were to happen to the governor, so it is noteworthy. And she told us again, I say this morning on Tuesday, that she that she is very close to making that announcement, that she's effectively done with the interview process and that she expects an announcement very soon. So we'll find out who that is, and that's interesting, not just because of who will be second in command, but also for the 2026 election and who her lieutenant is at that time.
And Stephen, if something were to happen, there is a person who is on standby.
Yeah, that's right. The Iowa Constitution designates the president of the Iowa Senate, and that's Senator Amy Sinclair, as the next in line in the case of there not being a lieutenant governor like there is currently. So,
the other thing she was asked about, cell phone usage in schools. Who wants to take a whack at that one? Erin?
Well, I can start. It's been an interesting couple of days since the governor first mentioned this in an interview that she's going to propose some sort of legislation. We haven't gotten a lot of details yet, but regarding cell phones not being allowed to be on students' desk, in their possession while they're learning in the classroom. Again, the details remain to be seen, but it's been interesting to hear the reaction to that, and a lot of people of both political stripes supportive, generally speaking, of this idea. Of some pushback about concerns in an emergency situation, would a student be able to get to their phone? But one of the more interesting proposals we'll be watching for when the governor delivers her condition of the state address.
Erin, at Radio Iowa, we've done stories from Ottumwa to Northwest Iowa of schools that have already made this decision and have done it sort of in degrees. Some of them can't have it in the classroom, but they can have it in their locker. The governor, when she talked about this, is really not giving any good clues about what she wants the legislature to do specifically, correct?
When she spoke to reporters this morning, what she told us is she wants it to be more of a floor. She said she wants to respect what those different school districts are doing, knowing that they've been listening to parents and families in their districts and kind of developing policies that go sort of different lengths towards this. So I think that whatever she does, she says she wants to complement and enhance what they're doing and not sort of usurp it.
And the one thing that occurs to me is they've been debating cell phone use in the legislature for a while, but it's about using it when you're driving, which they have never been able to agree on for over a decade. So that's kind of interesting. Let's move on, Katarina. Tell us about sunbucks versus food boxes.
Right, so Iowa has been one of just about a dozen states that has rejected the federal program that's more commonly known as summer EBT, gives some money on an EBT card, some food assistance for families over the summer who have kids and you know, are low income and potentially food insecure. So the governor has rejected this and proposed sending monthly boxes of food during the summer instead. The USDA has rejected her plan, saying it's too far kind of outside the bounds of what summer EBT is for them to even be able to approve using that money for these food boxes. And the governor is now saying that she is going to reapply for that once the Trump administration is in place. She said that she's very optimistic that the Trump administration would approve it and that she thinks they'll look at things a lot differently than the Biden administration looked at things. And she even said more broadly, she has a list of roadblocks, as she called them, that she feels she has faced with the Biden administration, and she wants to take those to the new Trump administration and see what can be done about those.
How does this connect to also the discussion about giving block grants to states and letting states decide how to use federal money?
Yeah, and Governor Reynolds talked about that with us Tuesday morning as well, and it basically boils down to states wanting more flexibility with how federal dollars are spent. Right now, in a lot of these programs, and this is one example, the federal dollars that come to the states to use towards these things have certain requirements that the states have to meet to be able to have and use those dollars. A block grant is much more forgiving. It's basically a chunk of money to the state that the states can use as they see fit. And so you hear from governors often, especially when their party and the White House party are different, calling for block grants.
Let's move on to stuff that's happening at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. If people are living online, they may have seen a picture of Senator Joni Ernst eating lunch with President-elect Trump, Elon Musk, who is the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, apparently, and then the Trump transition team leader. Amanda, what's going on?
Yeah, so this is part of a new initiative from the Trump administration to make government more efficient. As you mentioned, the Department of Government Efficiency. Iowa Senator Joni Ernst has been tapped to lead the Senate caucus of government efficiency. Part of that meeting was her delivering a letter to Elon Musk, who will co-lead the Department of Government Efficiency with Vivek Ramaswamy. Ernst delivered a letter saying that she has identified about $1 trillion in federal spending that can be cut from the federal government. She points to different things like federal dollars being spent on some infrastructure programs, a California high-speed rail program. She believes money can be reallocated from that. She also pointed to consolidating some government office space, even changing how we make the U.S. penny. So she has a lot of ideas. You may remember from her ads when she was running back in the day that she was going to make them squeal. She, on Fox News on Sunday,
do you remember that, Kay?
She wants to make the, what did she say? She wants the federal establishment to squeal. Yeah, so she's bringing that back.
How is this connected to her race for re-election? Anybody?
I mean, this was one of her signature issues when she first ran for the Senate, and she's been looking at these spending policies by the government for a long time and calling them out, what she calls wasteful spending. So I think she sees an opportunity to basically take that brand to the next level with this new department.
And I was just gonna say, she's often been, in hallways or on the Senate floor talking about how federal workers continue to work remotely after the pandemic, and she had said that was kind of a wasteful use of government spending. So she had been kind of a vocal advocate for this issue, whether or not that relates to still being in the spotlight.
She may also be wanting to get a little closer to President-elect Donald Trump ahead of her reelection effort, since clearly he has a lot of support in Iowa. And I'll just mention Governor Reynolds touched on this DOGE issue. She said she's pretty excited about this DOGE caucus to cut government waste, as she calls it. And she said, quote, "I did DOGE before DOGE was popular," referring to her government reorganization efforts over the past couple years.
The other thing that occurs to me is that Chuck Grassley made a name for himself when he became a U.S. Senator because he went after Pentagon spending. And it will be sort of fascinating to watch if Joni Ernst, the first elected female combat veteran, goes after Pentagon, Department of Defense spending as well. Just for the benefit of viewers who don't live in this space like the rest of us at this table do, Matt Whitaker, who was on the Iowa ballot twice, he was the Republican nominee for state treasurer. He was also a candidate for the U.S. Senate. He ran in that primary that Joni Ernst won in 2014. He was the acting attorney general during Trump's first administration for 3 months. He campaigned all over the country for President Trump, and he has been nominated to be the ambassador to NATO, which is an interesting assignment given what we're seeing unfold right now between Russia and Ukraine. The other thing that's happened is on Tuesday morning, I had an opportunity as a radio reporter to speak with Senator Grassley, and I asked him about these tariffs that President-elect Trump has proposed that would impose a 25% tariff on all goods coming from Canada and Mexico into the U.S. and adding on to the already existing tariff on Chinese goods that are coming into the country. Senator Grassley said tariffs are tricky, but he said he wasn't going to badmouth them. He said this is perhaps a negotiating tool. Anybody else think that, this may never come to pass?
It was interesting. We also asked Governor Reynolds about this topic on Tuesday morning, and she very much supported the idea, or at least the notion, the use of them at the very least as a threat or a negotiating tactic. She talked when we asked her about the potential impacts of the tariffs, she spoke exclusively about immigration and border crossings and the need for Mexico to help stop those people from coming across the border illegally, and said, I trust President Donald Trump on this. So she had nary a critical word about that proposal, at least as we sit here. If it actually goes into effect, if he follows through on that threat in January, we'll see then.
At this very table during a debate between 1st District Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks and Democratic challenger Christina Bohannon, they were asked about tariffs, and Miller Meeks expressed some reluctance about tariffs. And of course, this was, a month and a half before what Trump has said this particular week. And who can speak to what happened during the first Trump administration when they paid something like more than $23 billion to farmers in these tariff replacement payments, or whatever they called them, from the USDA. And Trump talked about that a lot during the campaign.
Yeah, this was, as far as I can remember, one of the bigger sticking points between Iowa's Republican delegation and the Trump administration during his first term in office, the impact that these tariffs had on farmers. And like you said, to mitigate that impact, he paid billions of dollars to farmers around the country. A good chunk of that coming to farmers in Iowa. I don't know if that will be part of the plan this time or not, or if those concerns remain.
How does one do that in an era when you have the DOGE?
Right.
That's true.
Right. The focus is all on spending cuts at the moment.
Well, speaking of stuff that happens at this particular table, Last week, if you were watching, the guest was Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, just reelected to a third term. You were sitting in that chair, as I recall.
I believe this very chair.
Oh,
yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a discussion about the President-elect Trump's plan to, on day one in the office, declare a national emergency and start deportation proceedings. And she was talking about that during the program.
Yeah, and we asked her, we cited the statistics that say there's a little more than 53,000 undocumented immigrants in Iowa, and should we expect them all to be deported in the next 2 to 4 years? And what Congresswoman Hinson said is it's her hope, and I thought that was an important word to emphasize, that the administration would focus first on those people who are here illegally and have had run-ins with the law. And we have heard President-elect Trump speak in those terms, generically speaking, but just as the start of his plan. That's not the end of his plan. So Congresswoman Hinson said that is her hope, that's where the focus is early on. So we'll see if that turns out to be the case starting January 20th.
Folks, we have about 10 minutes left for our discussion. Let's focus on the Statehouse in Des Moines. Stephen, there have been leadership elections among House Republicans, Senate Republicans, House Democrats, and Senate Democrats. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, I'll just run you through them one by one.
Great.
Mostly, not much has changed. So we'll start with the Republicans, who now have supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. They already had the Senate supermajority. The House one is new. Speaker Pat Grassley has been reelected. This will be, he started as Speaker maybe in 2019, so he's been in there for several years now. And in the Senate, they've reelected Jack Whitfer, a senator from Ankeny, as Majority Leader. So that's the same team that has basically been working with Reynolds as the Republican trifecta has passed really a lot of sweeping policy changes for the past few years.
And if I could jump in really quick, sorry, Stephen, on that. Speaking of Senator Whitfer, we can report that his folks who have followed this story may know that he was diagnosed with a brain tumor earlier this year, and we can report from Senate Republicans that treatments have been going well, and that's why he was reelected and plans to be back at work at the Capitol.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. His colleagues felt good enough about his health, and he feels good enough about his health, fortunately, that he's able to continue in that role. With the Democrats, although they lost some seats in the House, House Democrats have still elected Minority Leader Jennifer Confers to lead them again in the coming session. She's done that since 2021. And then the Senate is where we have a new face for Democrats. Senator Janice Weiner is the new Minority Leader in that chamber. She replaces Senator Pam Yoakum of Dubuque, who is retired. Senator Weiner's from Iowa City. She's serving her first term in the Senate.
But Katarina, this is not, it seems like there's kind of a game of rotating chairs in the Senate Democratic caucus.
Yeah, I mean, this is their third leader in less than 2 years. Senator Yoakum took on the top job there just last year. And before that, Senator Zach Walz was the leader, and he had been ousted by his colleagues, apparently because they didn't agree with some decisions he had been making about staffing in their office. And so Senator Yoakum stepped in, she's retiring, and now it's Senator Weiner. And yeah, it's just definitely been quite a much more shakeup in that caucus than in the other groups in the Iowa legislature.
And there will be just 15 Senate Democrats when the legislature convenes in January. What does the selection of a Democrat from Iowa City, a stronghold for Democrats, mean, signal, if anything?
Well, for one, I mean, you start with, like you said, there's only 15 of them to start with. So you only have so many choices. The lowest since, Stephen, you've done some reporting on this, is it like the early 70s?
The early 1970s, yeah.
Yeah, so lowest number of Democrats since the early 1970s. And should they be from Iowa City, which is the most liberal spot in the state? Should they be from another spot that's maybe a little more politically mixed? They don't have anybody from those spots in the Senate. They're all from the state's metro centers.
Basically, Des Moines, Iowa City, or Cedar Rapids.
And it's interesting too when you look at like some of the closest races that were in the state came down to, Senator Sarah Trone Garriott, who won re-election by just 29 votes in a suburb, Dallas County area, and then you saw Nate Bolton, Des Moines area, Republican Mike Pike unseated him, and that goes to show that Republicans are gaining ground in that metro area that may be also contributing to Democrats shrinking seats.
And the Democrats have been in the minority in the Senate since 2016. But with redistricting, especially in 2021, it's really kind of difficult to see a path back to 26 seats for them, right? They would have to pick up 11 seats that they currently don't hold, and it's really hard to look around the state and see where those are.
And that's because of the way the districts are drawn?
Yeah, that's right. So, Iowa redistricting law has a system. It's not based on partisan affiliation, but it is based on, you have to keep counties together if you can, you keep cities together. And so sometimes the way that those populations just work out, you have a lot of Democrats perhaps living in just a few districts.
And Nate Bolton's race was an example of that, and that's not to take anything away from Mike Pike, but Nate Bolton had been serving in a district that was a pretty safe Democratic district. It was almost entirely within the city of Des Moines. The redistricting changed the makeup of that, added a little bit of more outside of Des Moines there in Polk County into the Altoona. And so the district changed, slightly different electorate, a good year for Republicans. Republicans flipped that seat.
Amanda, at the very beginning of this program, I promised a discussion about assembling leadership teams in the House and Senate. One of the things that happened this past couple of weeks was House Speaker Pat Grassley announced the chairs and vice chairs for House committees. And this week, Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitver announced the chairs for Senate committees. There's a new committee in the House. Tell us.
There is the Higher Education Committee. So we have seen so much sweeping, change in education over the past few legislative sessions. This is the first time that the House will have a Higher Education Committee. Speaker Pat Grassley said, that it was long overdue for there to be a comprehensive review of the state's public colleges and universities. Representative Collins will be the chair of that committee. He said, the goal is to really refocus, that there's a workforce shortage in Iowa, that they need to be making sure that taxpayer dollars that go to these institutions are being used to promote education, that there should be less focus on some of the ideological agendas. You may remember, this Representative Collins was one of the leaders of shutting diversity, equity, and inclusion offices on Iowa's public colleges. So this is higher education has been in his wheelhouse, and refocusing it away from diversity, equity, and inclusion has been his passion for a little bit.
Stephen, one of the things Representative Taylor Collins told me was that this review will also include the community colleges and Iowa's private colleges and universities. That's pretty broad.
It is broad. I think that there's interest in the House Republican caucus to go beyond what they've traditionally done with state universities. Now, what tools they have at their disposal to do that might be a question, but there are funding mechanisms like the Iowa tuition grant that private colleges can receive that might allow the state to attach certain strings to funding.
There's been a lot of debate in the Iowa House about the carbon pipeline. Do we see anything in the makeup of what's happening in the Iowa Senate in terms of leadership of committees that would look to have a better route to making a bill become law regarding the pipelines? Anybody?
It didn't.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it didn't look like it to me. Sorry, Katarina, go ahead.
No, I didn't see anything that would indicate that would be the case. Because you mentioned this, I'm guessing, because Senator Waylon Brown was at the head of a committee, and he that would have been in charge of that type of legislation, and he blocked it, and he has resigned from the Senate. So.
And then you have Senator Jason Schultz, who has now been assigned to be the leader of the Senate Judiciary Committee because the longtime leader of the Judiciary Committee, Brad Zahn, a Republican from Johnston, lost his reelection. We have a couple minutes left. Katarina, there have been recounts. We've mentioned a couple in legislative races. The big one that national people are watching is this recount of Iowa's 1st congressional district.
Right, and speaking again on Tuesday, early afternoon, that recount is still not finished. It's still ongoing. There's a lot of people saying it's extremely unlikely that it will flip the result in Iowa's first congressional district between Marionette Miller Meeks. The unofficial results showed her winning by 800 votes against Christina Bohannon. So that's ongoing for now, and it's supposed to be done by next Monday, which is when the state certifies the election results.
And for people who don't know, there's a certification process, Stephen.
Yeah, December 2nd, like Katarina said, the State Board of Canvassers will meet to certify Iowa's results, so it has to be done by then.
So I'm wondering if anybody at this table will make a prediction about taxes. Governor Reynolds recently received the Tax Foundation's Distinguished Service Award. She's the first sitting governor in decades of experience to win that national group's award. What sort of taxes will she decide to cut this year? Anybody?
Well, just about every year that the Republicans have had the trifecta over the last 5, 6, 7 years, they've cut some form of taxes. And what I've heard on the campaign trail from a lot of Republican legislators is that next year is a property tax year. Mm-hmm. So whatever they're able to cobble together a majority coalition to get regarding property taxes, that is, I think, where the action will be.
And I think you all agree to that. And you must agree with me because I'm in charge of the time, and I have to tell you that we are out of it for this episode of Iowa Press. Thanks to all of you for being here and sharing your reporting with our viewers. We wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving holiday. And if you have any want or need to watch an episode of Iowa Press, you may do so at iowapbs.org. For everyone here at Iowa PBS, thanks for watching today.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa PBS Foundation, the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
Elite Casino Resorts is a family-run business rooted in Iowa. We believe our employees are part of our family, and we strive to improve their quality of life and the quality of lives within the communities we serve.
Across Iowa, hundreds of neighborhood banks strive to serve their communities, provide jobs, and help local businesses. Iowa banks are proud to back the life you build. Learn more at iowabankers.com.